It's nice to meet you, even as I not look at you. And thanks to Lynn and everyone here for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here, and we have some other writers. And I thought what I'd start first by doing is just reading some poems. I hope that's okay. I guess if you say no, I don't know what else. Tell jokes, but I'll save that for later. So anyway, I have a new book out called Thunderbird. And actually, there are books for you, but for some reason the mail didn't go through. I don't know if like the postman stole them all or something, and was like distributing them because they're a hot commodity. But so hopefully, yeah, they'll be here sometime soon. I guess at least by the next workshop. It's promised. So you get a copy of it. And I wrote this book. Do you guys like Sylvia Plath? Yeah. So have you ever read Mad Girl's Love Song?
Yes.
Yes, you have. So do you know what's in Mad Girl's Love Song?
What do you mean by in it?
I mean, do you know there's an animal in it, or?
No.
Okay, well we'll just refresh that. Does anybody else know the animal in Mad Girl's Love Song? It's kind of a trick. Well, I'll just read the two stanzas that I kind of got the title of this book from. So, Sylvia Plath wrote, "I'd fancied you'd return the way you'd said, but I grow old and I forget your name. I think I made you up inside my head. I should have loved a thunderbird instead. At least when spring comes they roar back again. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I think I made you up inside my head." So that poem's a villanelle, so it just kind of repeats. Anyway, there's that miraculous thunderbird in there, so I wrote a little bit about it. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Death in Sylvia Plath, and I wrote it for one of my students who she was reading a poem and she was trying to figure out what it was about. So this is the poem I wrote in response to that experience. So it's called Death in Sylvia Plath. My student in the city college really likes the poems of Sylvia Plath. She is writing her research paper about Lady Lazarus. I like this student. She spends some time leaning over me and telling me how in the poem, Plath turns from an object into an entertainer and finally into a demon. "Oh yes, you are right," I tell her. "We are pleased. I wonder afterwards, why do young women like Sylvia Plath? Why doesn't everyone?" The student tells me that when she was young, she liked Plath. I did too. I did not ride horses. Sylvia Plath rode horses. I don't have a thesis. I don't have a structure. I am a demon. There are blue streaks in the sky. It is spring. I am not you, nor do I want to be. It is 2:21 on 2/21/2010. I am not alive. No, I am no longer breathing. I don't live in this world. I already live in the other one." Oh, you guys have coffee. I was like, oh, they must be really bored. They're all reading their paper at the same time. Anyway, I'm glad you're following along. It's always nicer, right? Like to see it. Anyway, so I don't know if any of you have thought of, how many people in here are poets? Okay, so have any of you thought about what's going to happen, like when you write all your poems and maybe trying to get a book published? Or thought about that yet? It's it's a difficult road, and for me it was a really difficult process because a lot of poets enter book contests, and I entered maybe over, I don't know, maybe 400 book contests over the course of 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Like, it was forever. I mean, maybe I started before I was born and entered this contest. And it can be really depressing because, all you get is a rejection letter and then you kind of feel bad about yourself. But finally, some people, I didn't end up winning any of those contests, which kind of shows you But anyway, so some people that I, had just known in graduate school ended up publishing my first book, and I was so thankful for that. And so I wrote them this poem. And this is not probably in your packet. It's called Ever Read a Book Called Awe, and it's also my marketing device. So, ever read a book called Awe? Have you ever read a book called Awe? I have. I wrote it. That's my book. I wrote that book. I wrote that one. Some people read it. They said, "We will make your book." I said, "Really? I love you." They said, "We love you too." I said, "Good then. I will love you forever." They said, "Great," and looked scared. True story. Some people I love don't love me. Others love me. That's good. When you sit in a landscape of snow and you're a bird, that's awe. When you look over a big green field and the dead soldiers lie all around you, that's love. That's love and awe. Say it. That's love and awe. There is nothing better. Or if there is, then I don't care. So that was my poem to them, which they were probably still scared about. Let's see. So I know today is a narrative poetry day, so I tried to bring in poems that kind of told a story. So I guess I'll just read through them. And the first one, well, it's actually the second one in your packet, is called The Room. So this is going to take like 25 minutes, so I don't know if you want to just get comfortable. It rains incessantly. I go outside. I go inside. Inside the room are 4 ghosts. One is silent. One is old and another is young. Another preens himself upon the sofa. His hair is golden. There is a liar. Women and men wait at his legs, touching his airy cloak. He beckons me. I touch his face. What does it feel like? Nothing. I run from the room, down the steps, out the door, down the street. I get on the nearest bus. I take that bus to a train, the train to a boat. I get on the boat, then get on a larger one. I find a bedroom. It has a navy carpet, a red bed. I hide in yellow sheets. I fall asleep for days. When I wake, the golden man is next to me, touching my face, eyes going every which way. He tells me a story. It makes no sense. It is in a language that is like my language, but is not mine. I remember I am American. I say, "Is this America?" And he tells me that it is. In his hand appears a dish of ice cream, and when I eat the cold, dear liquid, I know I am already dead. I ask if I can at least go to heaven or to hell, whatever. Do I have to stay in this room with you forever, I ask him. He tells me I don't, that I can go anywhere, but that he and I are yoked. So wherever I go, it will be with him. I punch him in the nose. I run down the hull of a boat. I jump into the water and flail. He saves me. He drags me to a beach. I come to. He ties me to his ankles and sweeps me along to a house that belonged to his family. He lays me in a maroon room. A male ghost appears. He is scraggly. I touch his face. I kiss him on the cheek. I run out the door. The golden man follows me. I run and run. My father appears as the feeling of a vision and layers upon me. I am 2 ghosts. I stop and the man stops, and my father's ghost stops. And I look down and there is a hole, and I punch the man again. And my father and I go down into the hole. We slide down the hole for hours. My father is calm. Just stop, he says. I ask him if this is America. It is, the golden man says, as he catches us at the end of the hole, where there is a room with all my friends. By friends, I don't mean all of the people I've known. I mean all of the people I've truly loved. Smiling at me, everyone is calm. I sit down and they all come rushing at me. My father fastens me to a seat next to him. Am I still a witch, I ask them. My friend Conrad tells me we are still witches. One wall of the room drops and turns into a giant face. The face is awful. I look into the eyes, I melt and scream. Then I am whole again. I am by a stream. There is a farm with animals. I have made this farm. I get up and tend to the fruit trees and put the fruit in a basket. And in the background I hear children playing. And on the edge of my farm is a school. And the children are learning near my farm. And I go about it. And I go about it for a good long while. So I think I'm just going to maybe read one more poem and then move on to the other part of this morning. So this is a poem I wrote for my dog Lucy, who's 17 years young. And she is in a lot of my poems because she's my constant companion. But I was living in an apartment and there was a little boy who was really scared of her. And I don't know, are there any dog lovers in the crowd? Or any people scared of dogs? Oh, okay. I was gonna say I never understand when people are scared of dogs, but I feel your fear. Anyway, so this poem I wrote about a little boy being scared of Lucy. It's Dog. When my dad was just a corpse, the man came and put him in a body bag. There was another man with dementia who had shared his room. The man recognized the black bag and got scared. I held him as they wheeled my dad away. Now I sit on the front steps with my dog. I tell her that nothing is permanent, so we should sit here and enjoy the cold air that smells of other mammals. She sniffs and looks at me. I have my arm around her and start to cry. A neighbor comes up with her son, who hides behind the building's corner. He is afraid of dogs. I take my dog into the building. We jump up the stairs. We are just two things in the air. So sorry to end on slightly anyway, we'll try to be inspired. But so it's so great thinking about one of the things that girls right now and Lynn and everything asked me to do is to think about how and why I became a poet. So I just wrote a little bit, about thinking about the history of that, because I've always had, I don't know how you all feel, but I've always had a push and pull about, sort of being a poet and maybe not wanting to be. So I did not ask to be a poet. It started one night when I was 7 and could not sleep. I started writing poems to give myself something to do. Does anybody do that when they're late at night? Just something to do, and you don't really have to see. I mean, I guess now we have cell phones, but back in the, 80s, I just had to write in the dark, and poems are good because you don't have to worry about a story, unless they're narrative poems like today. But anyway, so the first one was called Timber, and it was about a bear, and the bear was scary and ferocious. The second one I memorized, was about colors, and it was called White Dignity, and I think I can still do it. So, White Dignity, sorry for the title, I was 7. White Dignity is suddenly black, and brown and gray, other colors that cause flack. Again, I'm 7. A sapphire poses amongst a bed of roses, and strength and triumph remain where gracefulness refrain. O copper-colored cream, what did I dream? Don't replay the past, or snakes will wrath. Violets, violets of the sea, why did you leave me? And when I wrote that poem, I would just recite to anybody. So I was like, you want to which has persisted. Beautiful paintings and visual art. My mother's a painter, so I was surrounded by visual art. So I did a lot of ekphrastic poetry. Do you guys know what that is? So ekphrastic poetry is when you just write poems about any piece of visual art. So you can go to any museum and just write some poems, and I love to do that. It's, you know, when you see people sketching in the mat, might as well be writing too. So, the earth, the moon, Greek mythology, politics, myself, my grandpa, who was a big figure, and animals, as you just heard. So I always wrote poems, but I did not think I was going to become a serious poet. For a long time growing up, I thought I was going to be a scientist. It was so serious a wish that I worked in a neurobiology lab throughout high school and dissected and stained fly brains, which was really awesome, actually, in order to study what parts of their brains controlled their behaviors. Even while believing I was not really a poet amidst all those brains, I wrote poem after poem in the late afternoon winter sun. I could not stop writing poems. In biology class, I turned every lesson into a haiku. Do you guys ever do that? Like, maybe not in biology, but so a few years into college, I decided I wanted to be a child psychologist because I'd always been fascinated with people's personalities and wanted to help children. But when it came time to apply for grad school, I met with my advisor, and he mentioned that I was interested in poetry, something I had forgotten. And I tried to play it off, but by the end of that conversation, I decided to go to MFA school. And going to MFA school was the best time of my life, a time that possibly has not been equaled, but until today, obviously. But it was because I found a writing community, and I saw myself as a poet, and I think that's so important. When you start to see it as your identity, you know, you start to feel like it's no big whoop. You can be writing and people can read your work and it doesn't seem scary anymore. So I think that's what's good about, you know, groups like you're a part of, is finding a community and finding mentors. So I'm not sure why I first turned into a poet, why I started writing when I was little, and I've always, you know, tried to get away from that idea of divine inspiration or the muse, but I don't know. You know, maybe there was some of that. But I'm glad that I did, and I think it's really important that there are poets and writers out there. So I'm so glad that we're here together today, and that we're all writers. Yeah, so that completes that part. Anyway, so I brought in a little exercise for us to think about, especially with narrative poetry. I don't know how we are on time. Is it? We're okay? Okay. Yeah, I was just going to go like this, but, okay. All right. There should be a packet for every, like, mentor and mentee, so I don't...
So we're sharing?
Yeah, I hope that's okay. Yeah, we can make more copies. Oh, I don't. Oh, I was gonna pass that one. Oh.
Do we have enough to share? Who needs? I might have to be more vigorous about mine.
Do we need more?
Does anyone have extra?
Wasn't there somebody back here? Do you guys? You need one? translate the stories in poems to make new ones. So when I'm writing a poem, I often like to translate, different stories or different images, or make a poem my own and start off with a poem that's already been written as a jumping off point. Do you all ever do that, or no? Sometimes. What do you do when you? Is it like another poem, or is it?
It depends. Maybe sometimes it'll be like a painting or like a TV show, or I like write songs about other songs a lot.
Yeah. So I like to do that because it can make a poem kind of come alive, and I can like own that poem. I can show it who's boss. So I thought we would do that today, kind of in a format. So so the first thing I do is I make a list of the preoccupations or obsessions of the other poem. What are some images in the poem? What are some things that poem is talking about? And then I figure out the story of the poem, whatever kind of loose story it is, whatever the narrative is. So I thought we could look at an example. And the example I brought in was a Catullus poem. Has anyone ever read Catullus? What do you know about Catullus?
Well, I took 5 years of Latin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so what do you know?
But yeah, I read a lot of it. So I look at this and I'm like, yeah, that's Latin.
Yeah.
It's definitely Latin.
Well, Catullus was a really wonderful poet. He only lived to age 30. And so he wrote all his poems during that time. He wrote a collection called 116 Songs. And it's sort of debated with scholars whether or not he wanted it all to be one collection. But he was dead, so they had to do with it what they could. Which is why it's good for all of us to be really, controlled with our work. So, just kidding. Anyway, not to get morbid. So he wrote all these poems about this woman, Clodia, who he was in love with, who is 10 years older than him, and was kind of this unrequited love. So he wrote poems, and he also wrote love poems about other people, as we'll soon see. So here's his poem. The first one is his poem in Latin. And Peter Green translated his poem. And does anybody want to read that translation aloud? Anybody here? Okay.
In the English, right?
Yeah, in the English, yeah. No. Yeah, I don't want to read the Latin either.
Oh, those honey sweet eyes of yours,
Juventius? Yeah.
Juventius. If they let me kiss them all I wanted, I'd go on 300,000 times and never feel I was getting near my limit. Even though our crop of osculations ended tighter packed than dried out paint years.
Do you guys know what osculations are? Kisses. Yeah, just all kisses. A really fancy word, right? But I would love some osculation. But you can say that now, I guess. So Peter Green has kind of this, stodgy translation. I have nothing against him. He's a lovely translator, obviously. But and so Bernadette Mayer is this poet, and she actually lives in upstate New York now, but she used to live in New York City and ran the St. Mark's Poetry Project. You guys know that? Seen her reading there? And she translated, the Catullus poem, and she kind of owned it. So her translation was, who wants to read that? Oh, good. Okay.
I'd kiss your eyes 300,000 times if you'd let me, Juventius, kiss them. All the time, your darling eyes, eyes of honey. And even if the formal field of kissing had more kisses than there's corn in August's fields, I still wouldn't have had enough of you.
So you can see how she, kept some of the meaning, but she made that beautiful phrase, the formal field of kissing, right? What were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, when were the respective translations done? Like what time?
Oh, it's sad that you asked that. Because actually hers was previous to his. I just brought it.
This sounds so old-fashioned.
I know, yeah. It's published by University of California Press. He has like all the songs, and it's pretty good, but it's very literal, right? And if we knew Latin, we could see that his is very literal, and she's making a lot of poetic leaps. But if we looked at the next page, I thought that I would try to translate the poem myself. So this is what I did. I made a list of preoccupations he has honey eyes, which I guess we know what that means. I mean, hopefully it's not real honey, but very seductive. And so much kissing that it is like the grain in the field. So, just it never can be enough. It's all this abundance and like a harvest. And I thought when I was writing my poem that I would make new preoccupations. So I'd have to have kissing, or else it's not the same poem, right? And then I had to have a guy. I guess I could have had anything, but keep it a little similar. But I really wanted to have fire. I wanted things to burn. And I thought, and how about a car? So I'll put that in mind, and some violets, because I like violets, so just do that. And so then I changed the story. So the initial story is kissing Juventus is so great, the persona of the poem can't ever get enough of it. But I kind of changed it that I didn't want the passion to ever leave. It feels like in the old poem, you keep kissing him, but the passion kind of evaporates after you're done with the poem. But I wanted the passion to go on forever. So here's my, translation of a translation where I changed the story and added different preoccupations. Does anybody want to read this one? Okay.
Why go in cars? They can be destroyed. I don't want to be destroyed by you. I love you and your want. We don't need cars. Why don't we sit in a sea of violets? I can kiss you a million times and never be sick of it. Let's go sit in some flowers. Darling boy, let's sit in a sea of flames, and I will never put the fire out of you.
So you can see I changed it, but I still kept with the poem. So I don't know how much time we have left. How are we doing?
We have like 5 minutes and then we're gonna do.
Okay. So maybe we could just sort of start together, just talking about it. I've just brought in a sample prose poem by Lydia Davis, and it's called The Fish Tank. So maybe we could just together just have a little listen. You guys could write a translation on your own at home. Does that sound okay? Okay, so does anybody want to read The Fish Tank? I'm trying to keep, okay.
I stare at 4 fish in a tank at the supermarket. They are swimming in parallel formation against a small current of a jet created by a jet of water. And they are opening and closing their mouths and staring off into the distance with one eye each so they can see. As I watch them through the glass, thinking of how fresh they would be to eat, still alive now, and calculating the weather I might buy one to cook for dinner. I also see, as though behind or through them, a large shadowy form of darkening in their tank. What there is of me on the glass, their predator.
Okay, so what are some preoccupations or obsessions of that poem? Yeah.
Fish.
Yeah, that's right. And we're done. Okay. Yeah, what else? What's something else that, yeah.
Dinner, like eating them.
Yeah, the hunger, and you think of that. Yeah. Anything else? Or, yeah.
Predator and prey.
Yeah, so that kind of tension between the hunter and the gathered, right? Anything else? Seeing. So like the hunter looking at the prey and the prey looking at the hunter and all that, the eyesight is happening. And so if we were to write a new poem together, which we won't have to have time, what are some things that you would put in that poem? What are some obsessions? What would you keep? Because like I kept the kissing, right? And I kept the guy in my translation. But then I added violet and fire and cars and stuff. So what would you keep? Yeah.
I would keep the fish, but instead of being in like this tank, they'd probably be in like a sea or a stream somewhere where there are more fish and more space for the fish.
Okay. Cool. Well, what's somebody else? What preoccupations would somebody else put in their poem? Yeah. The hunger, right? Because it's like the passion in the other poem, right? It's like such a big, part of what's driving the poem. Yeah.
I would keep the containment because they spoke about like the fish being contained in the tank, so I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so even if it was contained in something else, just keeping the fish contained is, I think that's good. So if we were going to change the story, what's the initial story, just like in one sentence? If we were to say it, anybody want to try? Yeah.
Should I do it like first person?
Yeah, sure.
I went to the supermarket to get some fish to eat because I'm hungry.
Okay. looking at the prey. I mean, at the predator or whatever, the person. Yeah.
It could also be just the change in perspective from you sort of initially driven by sort of a personal desire to do something, and then realizing that, you know, looking at it just from the perspective of somebody else or another creature.
Yeah, yeah. Now, that would be wonderful also. Yes. Could also have the perspective of the tank. Watching this interaction. Yeah.
I always find it strange in fish restaurants when they'll have like fancy, colorful fish in tanks over the, and you're like eating their relatives. And I've always wondered, what did they do in a previous life that they were like putting aside watching their relatives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something of that. Yes. Well, anyway, I guess we have to move on to Q&A. So maybe you guys, hopefully you'll write your own poem, your own fish poem, or just even try this exercise. And did anybody not get one? Because I do have this one. And I could make more copies or... Anyway, okay. So you... Okay, cute. Q&A.
So who's got a question for John?
Anybody have a question?
Because if not, I have some.
Yeah.
What happens when you get writer's block? Or do you get writer's block?
When I get writer's block, I like to write from objects. So when I get anything like writer's block, I just look at objects. And I was just telling Lynn, I'm kind of a hoarder. So I have a lot of objects that at my, late at night I can just look through my stuff. So I really get inspiration from looking at beautiful things and maybe taking a walk or going to a museum. Those things prevent any writer's block for me. Yeah.
You mentioned Greek mythology before when you were talking. Like, are you what are you into with Greek mythology?
Yeah. I love Ovid's Metamorphoses, and I love just thinking about gods having human characteristics and having human weaknesses. So I love thinking about that. Yeah.
In terms of your writing process, when do you decide to stop and stop editing, and when do you know if your poem is finished?
Yeah. Well, I know that my poems are finished by sound. And the sound of a poem is more important to me than the meaning. So if the sound sounds right, then I know it's done, even if the meaning might be not connected. Yeah.
I'm just curious about sound too. Is it when you read your poetry out loud to yourself, or do you ask friends to read it out loud and listen to someone else reading it?
Yeah. Well, it's really me reading it out loud, like obsessively to myself. But I think that's what's so great about having a community, being able to read it to people, and that's how I felt, for example, being in MFA school, there were people I could read it to, and now it's sometimes hard to find people to do that. Yeah.
How many of your own poems have you memorized?
Oh, not hardly any. Sadly. I mean, I probably could, but memorization makes me nervous. I don't know. I mean, I probably could recite it, but yeah.
Do other kind of writing in addition to poetry? And how does that compare?
Yeah. Well, I do some writing like for education, like educational articles and stuff. So I think doing that writing really helped my poetry kind of be clearer. Think about my audience and just think about the audience as wide as possible. Whereas when you're writing a poem, sometimes it can be hard to imagine who the reader is, but that other kind of writing can. Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you were uncomfortable saying, I am a poet? Like
Yeah.
you were a fraud?
Yeah.
And how did you get past that?
Yeah. Well, I think that getting your work out there and knowing that people are reading it, even if it's just online, like on a blog or something, but especially publishing in a journal or publishing a book, really helped me sort of feel like, well, even if somebody doesn't think I'm a poet, somebody does. So that kind of made me feel like I had validity and I could take ownership over that. Just knowing something like that. Yes.
I was actually curious about your
that come back inside. And it's supposed to be that the speaker has died and came back inside. So I was thinking a lot about how we have all these ways of identifying ourselves when we're alive, but that, if we think about existence past life, those identifiers probably aren't important. So like one way that I identify myself as American, so that's why that speaker just kept questioning it. And I wanted to be a little humorous because all this mystical stuff is happening, and yet they're obsessed with being an American, which seems ridiculous. At that point, it doesn't seem important. Yeah.
I just had one other question.
Oh, yeah.
How do you respond if someone reads one of your poems and has a completely different interpretation than maybe you intended? Would you just have more of a, well, great, that's your interpretation, or would you be more likely to say, well, that's really not what I had in mind? How open-ended, I guess, is how
Yeah. I guess it makes me really excited to think that there'd be another interpretation. Because then I've set the poem free, and it's free for everyone else to use. And that means a lot to me that somebody cared enough to read it and get that interpretation. But it is true sometimes when you write your poems, you're like, wait, that's not what that's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a parrot. What are you talking about? But you have to set it free, so yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah, I think.
I think we have to wrap it up.